Okay, yes or no? That's the,
Yes. I'd like to welcome back all of those of you who've attended meetings in the past before the summer, and a special welcome to many newcomers. For those of you who are not experienced Zoom users, if you wish to see closed captions, there is a button to click on at the bottom of your screen. Lauren has also put a link in the chat box so that you can stream the text. Please also click on mute so that you don't hear we don't hear background noises such as sirens and dogs barking in your house or apartment. We are recording this. When the recording is ready, we will post a YouTube link on our website for others who've missed it tonight. Now, David Landsberger is going to take a quick poll to see how many of you are members of our chapter. David, we might want to actually repeat this later because I suspect we're going to have more people continuing to come in. So I think we'll get on with the meeting. At our last meeting before the summer, I mentioned a new documentary film, The Biggest Obstacle, which focuses on the problems that affect people with disabilities throughout New York City's public transit system. The feature-length film details Jessica Murray's advocacy activities to make the system more accessible. In the film, she followed people with disabilities as they confronted difficulties with the system. In addition, she interviewed our very own Ruth Bernstein, who discussed hearing issues in public transit. It's a terrific film, and I would highly recommend that if you have a chance to see it, that you do see it. And I believe we're going to see an excerpt from that movie tonight. Dr. Murray, who is our featured speaker tonight, is chair of the New York City Transit Advisory Committee for Transit Accessibility. She earned her PhD in developmental psychology at the Graduate Center of CUNY in 2020, focusing her research on daily travel. Her dissertation was titled Self-Determination in Transportation, the Route to Social Inclusion for People with Disabilities, and it explores the role of basic psychological needs in transportation environments. In addition to chairing MTA's ACTA, she advocates for improving transit accessibility in New York City as part of the Rise and Resist Elevator Action Group. She will be joined later on in the meeting by MTA's Deputy Chief Accessibility Officer, Rachel Cohen. Rachel comes to her new role at the MTA after 3 years as the Director of System-Wide Accessibility for New York City Transit. Her team led several technology pilots, such as the Accessible Station Lab at J Street Metrotech Station in 2019, and worked on implementing accessibility improvements such as enhanced announcements and bus seating design. She holds a master's in urban planning from the NYU Wagner Graduate School of Public Service and worked previously at the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission. If you have a question for the speakers, please type it in the chat box. And at the end of each presentation, I will read aloud as many questions as we have time for. Even if you are not posting questions, you should keep the chat box open to avoid the orange chat icon popping up and covering the captions. If you prefer not to see the chat, you can drag and drop it to the side of your screen. So Jessica will speak first, and we will take some questions for her when she's done, and then we will hear from Rachel, and there'll be more questions at the end. Jessica?
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me, John. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, so as John mentioned, I recently finished my PhD about a year ago at the Graduate Center, and I actually came to know HLAA through John, who was a colleague in the same program and graduated a few years ago. Yeah, I advocate, I spend a lot of time advocating for improving accessibility, recently working on trying to secure federal funding for accessibility improvements. I met Catherine through the Advisory Committee for Transit Accessibility, the film, we're going to show about a 10-minute extended preview tonight. So this is kind of a new cut that we made for tonight's presentation. But first I'm going to talk a little bit about my doctoral dissertation research. I think some members may have taken a survey of mine in the past, and I just wanted to kind of go through some of the interesting findings, and there's more to it, but I'm just going to focus on the survey results tonight. So I became interested in this research because I think I was interested initially in transportation and kind of how that affects our psychology and our well-being. And so, when I started talking to people with disabilities, it kind of became like layers of an onion, where you start to realize that all these problems really kind of compound, and it makes it difficult for a lot of people to travel, to get to work. It continues to be an issue, even 30 years after the ADA, which was focused on trying to get people with disabilities into the labor force. Disabilities, your geography and your disability type definitely affects the kind of transportation experience you have. And so where you live and what kind of disability you have will dictate kind of what experiences you encounter when you're traveling.
Can I, Jessica, can I just interrupt you? You're talking too fast, I think, for us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
captions.
thank you.
Thank you.
I will slow down. So as I began researching this area, I realized that there were kind of two areas of study. Most of the studies I found were kind of small qualitative studies, and these were subgroups in specific locations. So there may be a study about, blind public transit users trying to navigate London, and it would be a small number of people that had one specific type of disability. Or there were national surveys that had, here are the travel patterns of people with disabilities. But really, when you've learned how they ask what defines a disability, it was one question, a temporary or permanent condition or handicap that makes it difficult to travel outside the home. And so, there's definitely a lot more variation to disability than what is represented. And I felt that these kind of siloed studies were not so useful. And as I dug into the problem, I realized that there's this problem of disability measurement and how we define that. And there's not really a standard measurement. So the US Census Bureau has their own definition. The CDC has a slightly different definition. So the way we ask these questions it varies, and there's not really one standard. But there is a group that's been working on trying to develop a new standard that can be used in any survey for about the last 10 years. And so in this example, they have, it's kind of a functional limitation question, but also a degree of limitation, so that, it's not just yes or no, it's kind of how a variable answer. And so they have up to 8 different types you can ask about. The first 6 are the most common, and those are vision, hearing, mobility, communication, cognition, which involves remembering and comprehending, or concentrating. Self-care is, can you take care of your own basic needs? And then some more other disabilities are upper body mobility, and of course, like mental health disabilities like anxiety and depression, which can limit people's mobility depending on how severe they are. And so I also started looking at the travel and well-being literature, which is fairly new. This is kind of a field that has gotten a lot of attention in the past 10 years, and realized that there was also, you know, kind of a lack of attention being paid to people with disabilities. And in my early research, talking to people about their travel experiences, it became clear that they endure a lot of stress, and this affects their psychological well-being pretty immensely depending on their situations. So I wanted to kind of incorporate the disability question, how we're measuring that, into this kind of a broader study of well-being and transportation. And so the theory that I used is called self-determination theory, and it's made up of several sub-theories. And the basic psychological needs theory was the one that seemed to work best with transportation. And so the theory posits that if you have fulfillment of autonomy, relatedness, and competence in any domain, then you will flourish, you will have high well-being, and you'll be self-motivated to kind of take on the challenges of each domain. And so nobody had really applied this theory to the area of transportation. So that's what I set out to do. So I poured through all of the research, the little bit that there was, and tried to find issues that may either thwart the fulfillment of these three needs or support them. And so I wanted to see how these factors taken together would impact well-being, which was another existing scale that I asked people, and then also to examine whether if you have a disability, if you have you know, if you score lower on any of these scales, and what the nature of those relationships are. So the methods I used were a series of 2 surveys. So I kind of changed the questions a little bit to try to hone in on some of these questions. And so some of the questions I asked about the basic psychological needs, this is one example for autonomy. And it was really pretty straightforward. How would you rate the ease of using transportation? And so these were some things that I found in the literature that might preclude someone from feeling like they were able to freely travel. And the ones that ended up in the final model were being able to afford transportation, getting reliable public transit service, distance that you have to travel between your home and places of interest, and physical barriers between home and work or other destinations. And then on the fulfillment side, I found existing measures that might capture the sense of feeling like your autonomy is fulfilled. And essentially autonomy means being able to go where you want to go when you want to go there. So mostly this set of questions boiled down to feeling like you were able to travel with ease, et cetera. And so I'm not going to bore anyone with the math behind this, but essentially these 3 components of autonomy, relatedness, and competence were put into a model to see if they were all kind of part of one factor, or if people replied to the grouped questions in a way that was similar enough to say that these were kind of 3 distinct things that we're measuring. And essentially they ended up being very distinct measures, even though they were related to each other. And so then when I kind of took those factors again, I was really you know, putting it into another model to see if the negative impacts of the environment, so these things that may thwart these needs, if that had an impact on how people felt that their needs were fulfilled, and then in turn, how that affected their well-being. And so transportation barriers did have a negative relationship with the basic psychological needs fulfillment and well-being. And this was a relationship that the transportation barriers did not have a relationship directly with well-being. It was explained by people's kind of sense of how they perceived their fulfillment of needs to be. So I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but basically if it weren't for this process of kind of assessing their transportation experiences and deciding, no, it's not very easy for me to get around, you know, if it weren't for that kind of process, their well-being wouldn't be as affected by the transportation barriers. And the relationship was more intense for people with disabilities, meaning that they had greater difficulty. So they scored higher on the transportation barrier scale. They had less need fulfillment, and they had lower well-being as a result of those factors. And physical disabilities, self-care disabilities, and blindness and low vision were the most significantly associated with transportation barriers. And other disability types were associated just to a lesser degree. So this is, I'm just going to kind of run through these slides quickly. These were different ways of measuring disability, and it was pretty consistently people with mobility disabilities and blindness and low vision. So these were different ways of asking the same question. And a lot of it just kind of boils down to, being able to understand information and being able to move throughout space. And when I kind of looked at some of the other, less recognized types of disabilities, like communication disabilities and fatigue, and those also had somewhat of an association with the transportation barriers. So people that have these types of disabilities, and they may have these in addition to other types of disabilities, which I controlled for, but those are things that essentially we just need to pay attention that people with those types of disabilities may also be having challenges, and that may not be considered because we kind of only think of these other types. So the next steps, hopefully for my research, are to expand on the survey questions and include more specific barriers that could affect these 3 basic needs, and also to advocate for inclusion of more detailed disability questions in the National Transportation Household Survey. And I'm happy to take any questions if people have them now, and then I can switch over to the film after the questions.
Can I pop in with a quick question?
Sure, go for it.
How did you find the people to fill in these surveys online? How did your subjects end up being subjects?
I did a lot of outreach through different local disability lists. I know the HLAA also shared a link to my surveys at least once, maybe twice. I did outreach on social media. It was kind of a snowball sample. So, generally speaking, it's better to have a random sample, but that's very hard to do as a single person without a lot of resources. Yeah.
There was a question in the chat box about showing captions and things like that, but it seems like Rachel's going to address that, so I'll save that for later. I don't know if this is a good time to ask you questions about advocacy, or should that wait till after the film?
I get maybe after the film.
Okay,
yeah.
fine. We'll see the film then. Great.
Okay. All right. So let me switch over to that. Hold on one second. Okay.
The audio doesn't seem to be working.
Oh, Okay, let me work on that. Hold on a second. Okay. Can you hear it now?
Well, there's nothing, the film isn't going, so. Got it.
It's really tight because of the pillar and how small the platform is, and there's a lot of obstacles in the way.
I have a fear of the subway. Most times I encounter problems with elevators not working.
Urine in the elevator. More urine. I used tampon. More urine. Vomit. This one really scared me. Garbage. Garbage. Sometimes there's so much urine when you roll in, there's no way to get around the urine. So now you've rolled through it. That's the result. My arm is absolutely disgusting. I didn't put a photo there of an elevator that I rolled into that was smeared in feces.
So the vertical gap requires you to be able to climb over the height of it. Now, if the car is packed, you'll have less of a gap because the weight of the car is squishing it a little. So if it's midday, an empty car, you can have a 4-inch gap.
I've been getting on and off at this stop for years when my front wheels went into the gap. And I'm literally holding on like this going, help me! Help me!
No. Nothing. The thing about finding something is that you have to know that it's there in the first place.
Hi.
Do you have any clue to where she may be?
I have no idea where she's at. I'm sorry. You're connected here.
No worries, we're gonna fix this. I just finished speaking to a couple of agents, both of them, one of which was a station agent and some guy miles and miles away, trying to find out where the NQW trains are. And as it turns out, I'm right by them.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
A lot better than it was.
You can actually at least see each step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they have the yellow strip at the top of the stairs, that's very helpful. But it's completely haphazard here. There's no uniformity at all. I need to know when it starts. I never know when I go into a station if they're going to have steps painted.
See how this is black all the way across and then it's yellow at the edges? And that's helpful right now because it's not very crowded, but during rush hour sometimes I'm forced to walk down the middle because there's so many people. I can't get over to the side. So I can't always tell coming from that direction. You can't see the yellow on the front there. I won't even look at this because a lot of times these are not even accurate anymore, and it's harder for me to read than when I can hold on my phone and close. Because the other thing is, looking things up on my phone, people don't know if I'm looking at a map or if I'm looking at an email. People might not realize that you're lost.
But I have found if I go on Google Maps and I can look on there and follow the route that I'm taking, like that's more helpful than asking other people most of the time. I use things like the exit strategy app, which is really immensely helpful because it will show the layout of the station on a map. And so if it's a really strange station like Times Square where there's no rhyme or reason to it, it's really helpful to have beforehand a mental map in my head.
I use the subway, bus, three-wheel bike, ferry, cabs, and such a ride. My preferred ride to work is to ride my bike to the ferry and ride my bike to work. I had the system sort of memorized. I know where the elevators are. I get tired, so I have all the shortest distances memorized. The biggest obstacles I encounter are stairs. I asked a passerby to carry my walker up and down stairs, and I just slowly make my way up and down stairs.
On the subway, verbal announcements are not understandable yet. I'm making everything that's verbal visual. That basically is, you know, if the train is going to be delayed, put it up on the sign. New York City information booths are looped, so you can use your T switches, and I use my iPhone. I am a big user of visual help. In other words, I use maps, I use the MTA app, I have a subway app, and I use Google. The MTA app now tells you what's running, what's not running, when the trains are coming, etc. It really has, in the last couple of months, really changed a lot. I usually know where I'm going, and I have this wonderful map on my phone, which gives me all the possible information I could use.
I basically use my phone like find the map thing, which is basically the first part of the image on your screen, and just type in the address of like where you want to go, and it gives you the options of like which transportations you need to take. I'm mostly comfortable with like just using the phone on my map and not needing like something for people with disabilities. It's very, very, very difficult. You just gotta be smart and like be aware of your whole surroundings.
For my own safety, I need to stay away from the type of people that I need to be away from. Anyone who curses, anyone that looks like they're a bad person. That's when I feel a little danger. It's hard to be safe when you're on the train. You never know what will happen. I need to be careful, to be aware of my surroundings, and be aware of the people that are around you when you're on the trains.
To be called Train Daddy is quite, it's bemusing in some ways, but it's quite flattering. I'm Andy Byford, President of New York City Transit. I'm very proud of the Advisory Committee for Transit Accessibility, or ACTA. What really makes ACTA powerful for New York is that it's made up of a much wider spectrum of people and representing different communities. We do need advocates to help us better understand how we can do better.
This was created by Andy Byford, and he really wanted to get input from the disability community on their needs. The committee is made up of 18 people, including myself, April Coughlin, Edith Prentice, and 15 other advocates and people with different types of disabilities. I've been the chair of the committee since January 2020, and we're organizing 5 different subcommittees to address all of the different issues that touch accessibility. They have had a team for ADA compliance, and I think compliance is a little bit different than what we're trying to do, which is to move beyond the requirements and what's in the law, and to actually bring in people with the experiences that can point out the problems that are maybe not so clearly defined in the law, but negatively affect their experience.
Jessica now chairs the advisory committee, and I think that's again really good. It shouldn't be a staff member that chairs that committee. It should be someone with skin in the game. It should be an advocate, and I think Jessica's really risen to that challenge.
So I'm here at the Accessible Station Lab at J Street MetroTech. Some of the features that they're trying out here are tactile guideways for people who have low vision or are blind. there's a lot of good stuff happening here. I'm excited to see some progress and a willingness to try new things.
To make this system, this subway system, fully accessible. It's a huge task. This is a very old system, but we're deadly serious.
We have unleashed something that is not going to be suppressed. The accessibility genie is not going back in the bottle.
Okay, so that was a little preview of the film, and we tried to get a variety of the different challenges that people with different types of disabilities encounter when they're traveling. So happy to take questions if people have them, or do we want to go ahead and hand it over to Rachel?
I'll have a couple of questions before we move over to Rachel. One is about Andy Byford, who is now left, and where do you see things going since who succeeds him? How do you think things are? He was a strong advocate.
Yeah, well, I think there's been a little bit of a shakeup at the MTA in the last few weeks with Governor Cuomo stepping down. In the film, there's a lot more about Cuomo. I think it is, it is very politically charged. And I think Jano Lieber is, I've met him a couple of times. He seems genuinely interested in improving accessibility. So I think, we're hopefully in good hands, and yeah, we'll see how things start to develop in the next few weeks.
Good. My next question is really short.
If I could just add to that, thank you, Jessica, for that, and similarly say Craig Cipriano, who's the acting president of New York City Transit, comes to us from the Department of Buses, and I think also shares that commitment. We've worked very closely with him on a number of accessibility related initiatives. So there have been several changes of leadership, but I'm optimistic that commitment is not changing.
Thanks, Rachel.
Jessica, the other questions I have really are sort of more maybe related to your dissertation, but first of all, what can we do to advocate ourselves? And then the second part of the question is, I've been very impressed and inspired by the people I've seen in your film or in films like Crip Camp, seeing people with disabilities advocating. And do you have any sense about what that does to the three things you were looking at: autonomy, relatedness, and competence? Does advocating enhance those things?
I didn't study that directly. I did ask some questions about disability identity in one of the earlier surveys, and asking how people, if they agreed more with the social model of disability, which is that, it's not the individual's fault, it's kind of society's fault for failing to make our environments and buildings inclusive of people with disabilities, or did they agree with the medical model? But it wasn't really a strong indicator of how they kind of deal with these transportation challenges, which was the problem I was trying to study. But I think that's a really great question for someone to research in the future, because I think it does make a difference in terms of if people are willing to advocate to lawmakers, they're a lot more likely to speak up when they need help, or if something is wrong when they're actually traveling. I think there's probably definitely a connection there.
From my own experience and from seeing the people in these films, I think, and it's part of the message of HLAA is advocacy, to advocate for yourself and advocate for the hearing loss community. And my own sense is it really does enhance feelings of autonomy. It does enhance feelings of competence. And certainly there's a great sense of relatedness from being with other people with the same challenges who are all together advocating for these things. So,
yeah. That's a great question for more research,
okay.
As they say.
Well, congratulations on all the work you've done so far, and thank you for the, for that excerpt from the video, which I think the movie is an exceptional movie, and in every way, and it's even just in terms of production values, it's really first rate. So I think maybe now we will turn to Rachel, who will talk about some issues, and I think answer some of the questions that some of us are thinking about. Rachel?
Sure. Well, I certainly hope that I can answer some of the questions. Let me get my presentation queued up here. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen, and if somebody could just give me a hi sign when you see the cover slide. Okay, great. Thanks, John. Oops, and that's my notes. What am I doing? Okay. Great. Well, thanks again. First of all, thanks again, everybody, for giving me and, on behalf of my team at the MTA a chance to present at the meeting this evening. It's really a pleasure to be with everybody, to see and hear what's already, a spirited conversation. And I'm looking forward to getting feedback, from many of you on some of what I'm going to speak about tonight. And, hopefully starting what will be an ongoing conversation with many of the advocates and the participants in this group. Again, I'm Rachel Cohen. I'm with the System-Wide Accessibility team at the MTA. And, I saw the comments in the chat, and I understand, right, the feedback that is shared there, that too often accessibility, is defined in the public sphere as ramps and elevators and wheelchair access. And I'm going to actually not talk at all about that tonight. I really want to talk about, our team and our agency's broad vision for accessibility. So when we think accessibility, we're thinking, yes, about, vertical access and the many people it can benefit, including but not limited to those who use mobility devices, but also, as folks have already been alluding to here, access to information, right? We hear it constantly from our advisory committee members, like Jessica and Catherine and others on this call who have participated in our ACTA meetings, from outreach and engagement with all the community groups and events we go to, that people want the ability to travel and to do so independently and comfortably and with confidence, feeling safe and welcome in the transit system, and information and knowing what's going on, right, is absolutely critical to that. So I want folks to know that we're aware of and keenly interested in working together to come up with solutions to that sort of piece of the accessibility puzzle as well. So I'm going to talk about a few of the things that we're doing, really kind of scratching the surface, but hopefully some helpful information, and as I said, the start of a longer conversation. So I wanted to start actually with a few screen captures from the My MTA app. So this is the MTA smartphone app. It's just My MTA. If you are a smartphone user and you don't have it, hopefully you'll check it out after this presentation. And you can also get much of the same information on mta.info. And if my screen looks a little funky, so let me know if you are seeing something different, or if I'm, going too fast for the captions or anything like that, please chime in. So the My MTA app, right, is really a great source of information for folks that do travel with smartphones, and provides a whole range of information about subways, buses, and the railroads. I saw there was a question in the chat, about Metro North. My MTA and all MTA resources also do cover Metro North and Long Island Railroad. And a few of the things that I think are particularly important and useful about the My MTA app are highlighted on the screen. So you can, easily go there and get service information, visual service information about subways and buses and rail, but you can also favorite, the line you ride the most, the stop you visit the most, and get that information like really quickly at your fingertips. We provide everything here, is visual and can also be read with screen voiceover on an Apple or Android phone. And it's, it's programmed to work effectively in that context. And it's real time, right? So one of the challenges that I'm going to come back to in a few points in this, in this discussion, is that the plan stuff, the plan schedules, the program stuff, like that's in some sense the easier stuff to capture, right? And to get onto the screens and into announcements. It's the unplanned stuff that's the challenge, right? The diversion that wasn't part of the schedule, you know, the unplanned scenario, the parade that diverts the bus, and so you know your usual stop is missed. Those are the harder things, right, to capture and to get to our customers where they are on their journey in real time. But we're working, you know, on a lot of different fronts to make that happen. So all of the information that's on MyMTA is real-time information, you know, so you can see here, this is a snapshot from earlier today, I think, you know, what was going on with service. It's also very easy from the app to get to accessibility features and many of our different maps. So the screenshot all the way on the right is the kind of map menu on MyMTA. And I wanted to highlight that, you know, our team has worked with our marketing, production, and maps teams to create different versions of our subway and bus maps for, you know, different audiences to highlight accessible stations. We have a large type version of the subway map, and we're interested in developing more products like that over time. So this is really, you know, kind of a essential and really useful hub of information that gets that real-time information into, you know, folks' hands or onto the web, and does it in, you know, what's designed to be a universally accessible way. And we're also, the last thing that I wanted to say here is that one of the things that we're working on right now is adding push notifications to the MyMTA app. So if you use the app and you're on a trip and there's some, you know, unplanned service disruption, you would get a notice right onto your phone to let you know. And if you don't, you know, if there's not an announcement where you are, or if you're not able to hear the announcements, that's going to put that information at your fingertips as well. So I think that's a nice place to start when we think, you know, what does access look like for a lot of different people. But, you know, this kind of big version of accessibility also needs to and does take into account the fact that not everybody travels with a smartphone, right? So we also believe and are putting into practice, you know, the idea that information should be available and accessible regardless of the technology, you know, that somebody brings into the system on their own. So we mirror a lot of that information on screens, and I'm going to talk particularly about on buses and subways. So for folks that, you know, are regular New York City bus riders, which I'm sure many of you are, you've probably seen a bus with the Digital Information System, or DIS screens. So there's an image on the screen here of a New York City transit bus with the digital information screen. And on the left, it shows the next stop with the stop requested sign, as well as upcoming stops. On the right, there's an MTA public service announcement, sort of public respect, anti-hate campaign. So we use this digital information screen, again, to give real-time service information. We can show stops, we can you know, show how far away you are, we can show a map, and we can give public service information. And all of the stop information is presented in visual and audio formats. So when the bus arrives at a stop, it's announced. It, you know, is the audio and the visual components are synced together. And again, it's about, you know, presenting information in a way that's as universal as it can be. And we currently have these DIS screens on about half of our fleet. They are coming in on all the new buses we're getting. So we'll be adding about 1,000 more by the end of next year. And also continuing to work to retrofit the existing fleet. So digital information screens, you know, key feature on buses. Somewhat similarly on the subway side, again, if you've, you know, been in a station recently, and I know that people's travel patterns have been different in the last year and a half, but many subway riders have probably seen these. They're often in pairs. So the image on the left is two large digital screens. The left screen has a subway map. The right screen has what we call our customer information center dashboard. So you'll often see two of these screens paired together right near a station entrance. And usually we're showing on the left either the system map or a line map, and on the right, the dashboard. And again, you know, as many people have mentioned in the video, in the chat, a lot of what we traditionally provided and continue to provide through announcements, we're able to capture on these screens so that that information is also available visually. We're giving real-time, you know, as an example, right, planned work on the right. It shows planned work on the 4 downtown trains will skip 138th Street Grand Concourse. So something that, will probably be announced on the train or at an upcoming station is also right there visually when you enter the station. We provide elevator, escalator status, and this is real-time information. And then this line map, the screen grab in the middle is a line map, is also real-time. So that's, it's not static. What does the 5 line look like? It's the next train, coming into the station in 2 minutes is going to make these precise stops. So again, when a train's running express or, the F is running over the M on the weekend, we know that those are really challenging situations for folks. And it's difficult, to get that information to people in the system. But we're looking to do it, in a number of different ways. We're also constantly kind of iterating on the design of the screen. And we've done some field visits, including, I think with some folks on the call tonight, looked at the screens, gotten feedback on how to make the color contrast better, how to make them more visually accessible. So that's something else that we always have in mind. And you can even see here, the image on the left, the screen is very white. It's a bright, very bright white screen, which provides good color contrast. But we also heard from folks that that's actually can be challenging to look at, particularly in the underground environments, that really bright reflective white is just not an ideal viewing experience. So we're trying, we're trying to kind of back it off, go to a grayer screen without losing the color contrast. And we've done black, white on black. So screen design and, design for contrast, for text size, for visual access, all things that we think about, but, not to say that we have any of it solved. We're always working to hear from customers and see how we can improve these things. Again, we have screens and stations, which are very useful, but I know for many customers, and what we hear from many customers is it's when they're on the train, that's when, they're looking, they're listening, they're really seeking that, real-time service information. So on our newer technology subway cars, we do have, on the left is an image of an electronic strip map, and that's on the 2 and the 5 line. And also on the L and the J and the Z, you might see that. And on the right is what we call the find screen. And that's in a newer generation of subway cars. And, these are stop maps, but again, they give us a little bit more flexibility to provide real-time service information. So on a find screen, on the screen on the right, this is a map of a Q train, Broadway Express, downtown Manhattan to Brooklyn. There, if the train is skipping a stop, that will show on the screen where that stop would appear. It will show, does not stop. So again, something that the conductor will announce is also available on a screen. And just to give a little sneak preview, some of you might have seen these pictures, but these are some photos of the R211 test car. So this is our newest technology subway car. We got the first test car this summer. We actually had an event in July where we had it out at the Coney Island Yard, celebrating the anniversary of the ADA. We had some, did a visit to the car and had some advocates speak about their experiences on subways and buses. So, again, even more of a focus on not just having screens, but having more screens in strategic locations with more real estate, more flexibility, and more opportunities to provide information. So this slide shows two different versions of what the strip map will look like on 2 different lines, as well as the overhead LED screen. In this image, it's displaying the time, but the screen also shows next stop. And the more and more advanced our technology gets, the more we can do with that screen. The more options we have to have announcements that the conductor can choose. Not just the PSAs, the security announcements, but also this train will skip the next stop. Like we're working toward having more of that information available with our newer technology cars. And this car will be, this is a single test train, and it will be tested like on tracks and customer service next year. So this is all, basically everything that I've spoken about so far are things that are out there today that are in the system, but we're also always testing new things and looking at, what else can be done. And this is something that my team is really focused on and that I'm really proud of. That, you know, when our team was started by President Byford a couple years ago, that was really part of the charge, was to be, you know, internal advocates looking for new technologies, new solutions, you know, things that have not always been done, not just here in New York, but in transit environments in general, that can get us, you know, toward that goal of universal accessibility. So I know at least a couple of people on this call have been with us to Bowling Green. The picture on the left is the northbound 4-5 platform at Bowling Green Station, which I am just above at our office at 2 Broadway right now. We did install a hearing loop on the platform there. I would say we got mixed feedback, so to speak. There's a lot of electromagnetic stuff going on in a subway station. And I don't think, you know, we've quite cracked the code of how to install a hearing loop on a subway platform that works for people. But this is actually still there. So if you're passing through, you know, I'd encourage you to take a listen if you use hearing aids with T-coils, and, you know, see how well it picks up the announcements for you. Again, you know, screens are great. Screens are important. They're part of the solution. But we know that there's, you know, there's information that's audible that might be coming from the booth, and we want that to be, you know, available for as many people as possible. So as was mentioned in the video, all of our station agent booths do have a hearing loop, and we're looking, you know, for opportunities to loop other areas of the system as well, including, as the kind of schematic on the right of this slide is a hearing loop that we retrofit onto one of our buses. In 2019 and 2020, we did some testing on this bus, which was actually pretty successful. We've done some ride-alongs, and, you know, not every single rider, but many of the folks we went out with found this really helpful in, you know, being able to utilize bus operator announcements. And based on this testing, we have a few buses coming in early next year that will be looped from the manufacturer. So we're going to look at, you know, whether something that is kind of purpose built with the hearing loop performs better than a retrofit, and that is a direction that we'll be, you know, looking to explore for the future. And again, you know, thank you to those of you on this call who have come out with us and done hearing loop testing, and there will be more. So stay tuned for more on that. I have a couple more slides, but I'll also say I can't see the chat while I'm presenting. So if there are any like clarifying questions I should be answering, let me know. But I know we're going to have time for discussion at the end too. So, you know, again, the video highlighted Jessica speaking at the Accessible Station Lab at J Street and a few of the features there. And I'm sure, you know, some of you have had a chance to go there and check out what we did, the 15 features that we tested. A combination of, you know, wayfinding apps, new treatments in terms of tactile and braille maps, wayfinding assistance on the floor, you know, help finding different ways to find the accessible pathway through the station from the elevators to the boarding area. Really exciting test project. And, you know, I'm sure many of you are thinking, well, that was late 2019, early 2020, what now, right? So we unfortunately kind of wrapped up the testing just as we were heading into the COVID era. But I am happy to say that we got a ton of positive feedback from the station lab, and we have been able to use that to advance some of the features that we got the most positive feedback on. So we have boarding area stickers on the floor at Grand Central Station, and they're actually a design that's slightly altered compared to what's on the screen here based on feedback. And we also did some of the floor-based wayfinding tape at Grand Central, particularly to help folks navigate around some construction there last year. We installed an additional tactile line map of the one line at 23rd Street Station on the one, and are looking, you know, at more stations to do those tactile line maps. And we continue to test the Navalens wayfinding app on the M23 SBS line in Manhattan through the Transit Tech Lab. So, you know, we heard a lot about the promise of what was done at J Street, and, you know, we're in a challenging time in terms of budget and operations, as is everybody in the country and in the world. So we're really trying to be thoughtful and strategic about where there are opportunities to, you know, partner with other projects or strategically get these, you know, J Street pilots out to other stations and other places in our system. So I was asked to give an update also on Omni, to change gears a little bit, and I'm happy to do that. And I think we'll probably want to come back to a future meeting and give a more detailed presentation on Omni, but I can certainly give a quick update. So for those of you who are not familiar, Omni is One Metro New York. It's the MTA's new fare payment system. It is a contactless payment system. So if you've traveled transit in Chicago, Boston, DC, San Francisco, you're probably familiar with contactless card, fare payment systems. One thing that is exciting about Omni is that it's available not just with an Omni card, but also, with your smartphone, or if you have a contactless credit or debit card. That's actually the piece that we rolled out first. So you can use Omni today with a smartphone or a smartwatch with a wallet feature, or a contactless payment card. But we're actually going to be rolling out the Omni cards soon. So if you prefer to, use a physical transit card, that's going to be available soon. Omni is a phased rollout. It's a large change that impacts all aspects of our operations. We call it One Metro New York because it's going to be a unified fare payment system across subways, buses, and railroads. So we are rolling it out in phases. We have Omni validators in subways and buses now, and you can tap and go. You can ride with Omni. I'm sure many of you have. You can transfer now with Omni, but we are, as we move forward with the Omni deployment, we're really now kind of getting into the program part of Omni. We're going to start rolling out reduced fare in the coming weeks. Omni for Accessoride will be coming by the end of this year. We'll be turning on the Omni validators at the auto gate soon. So this is really, an exciting time for the deployment of Omni, and we're really getting to the point where, so we've had millions and millions of Omni rides, right? Folks that have done the single paper ride, tap and go. But as we roll out the Omni card, as we roll out the reduced fare program, as we move toward Omni for the commuter railroads in the coming years, I think this is when you're going to see the system, really come into its own and be available to work for all of our riders. We've said until now, Omni is here for many kind of use cases, but continue to use your MetroCard if that's what works for you. And MetroCard will be around until 2023. But I think we're kind of just on the precipice of Omni really coming into its own in terms of, offering the variety of benefits of a contactless, account-based, fully integrated fare payment system. So we will be doing a soft launch for reduced fare customers, and there may be folks on this call who are involved in that program. And I would think after that soft launch, we'd be happy to come back and give more information about where we're going next with Omni for reduced fare, for Accessoride. But I think I've spoken long enough, so I think I will stop there. And happy to take questions and hear some feedback. And thank you all again for your time and for your input.
Well, thank you, Rachel. That was very informative. I would, if David, is there a way for you to save the comments in the chat box and give those to Rachel and to Jessica? Because there were a lot of very specific comments and complaints that I don't think are necessarily that we should spend our time on, comments about specific stations or specific lines. There was one general, David?
Yeah, I can save part of them. I'm having trouble with my local Zoom clients. So if somebody else can do it, I can make you the host and you can do it. I've lost locally a bunch of the comments, but they're still there for everyone else.
I can save the chat on my computer.
You've got them, Jessica?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll save it at the end of the meeting as well.
Thank you.
There was one just sort of general question that was in the chat box, which is, do you think the decision makers actually have an understanding of hearing loss? Anybody?
That's a great question. I mean, I will, so I won't try to speak for others at the agency. I'll speak for myself. I am not a person with hearing loss. So I would love to hear from some of the folks on this call about, you know, whether what I presented is responsive, I guess, to you know, what you're looking for. But I will say that's part of why we set up the advisory committee for transit accessibility, right? We have a really diverse group on that committee, and the whole idea is to, you know, get input from real riders who, you know, who are representative of many types of disability, but also, you know, all different types of transit ridership in all different parts of the city. So, you know, I can speak personally about my own experience and, you know, how we try to get feedback from people that have different experiences.
I believe Catherine is on that committee. Yes, so we are represented there. The next thing I would like to go on to is there were a number of comments about loops. One comment was that loops don't help deaf people, which of course is true, but that doesn't mean that they aren't valuable for many of us. Also a comment about that Bluetooth may be supplanting hearing loops, but I think that that's actually, although there is research being done, that's long into the future and the technology is very unproven, and having more loops I think probably is valuable. That said, however, it does bring up the issue of captions, and we are very fortunate here to have a terrific captioner, Lauren Schechter. I don't really expect that you're going to have her ride on all your buses and all your trains, but and automatic captioning is not nearly as good as that, but still it's useful. And you know, conductors are not going to start typing, I don't think, realistically, but automatic captioning on a screen on the train or the bus would be certainly, I think, a big help to many of us who can't really hear the announcements. So, and you know, automatic captioning works pretty well. That is part of your plan at the moment?
So, you know, what we think of as sort of voice to text, right? You're right? I mean, I can do it on my phone, right? I could start, oh, well, that's my son. But I could start, you know, talking an automatic caption on my phone. So I think that's not the technology challenge. The technology challenge, particularly on the subway side, is really around connectivity. So, you know, if you want Google open captions or, you know, something like what you have on your phone, we have to solve for how do you get that sound from the microphone, you know, connected, presumably sent to the cloud, transcribed and back down to the screen on the train. So it is something that we've looked at, but there are, I think the challenging part is not actually the kind of, you know, automated captioning. As you said, it's not perfect, but it probably would be very useful. It's kind of the other infrastructure connection pieces.
They don't give announcements. Excuse me.
So yes, it is something that, you know, that we're looking at, but it's not something that we can, you know, put in the system today.
Okay, could I like to say something, please?
Sure.
And it's very hard. It's very hard to get announcements. No, this one's talking. Hello?
Yeah, how are you?
Can you hear me?
I'd like to mention that
This guy Charles is talking.
The LaGuardia Airport project, I believe they have had touch screens, and they solved some of the problems of the audio going into the cloud and coming back. I wondered if someone should look at what they've done at the LaGuardia Airport project and see how that works.
Anybody
Right,
want
so
to
look
comment?
at, I think the feedback was look at LaGuardia with the new, I guess particularly, right, Terminal B, the new parts of LaGuardia, how they caption announcements.
Hello, can I ask a question, please?
Sure. Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
I have been stuck between train stations so many times. And my concern is they hardly ever make announcements. And if they do, I never was able to understand that. So my question to you now is, are they going to update it for us to be aware of what's going on between train stations?
So I think, there's a kind of human resource and operational part of that, and there's a technology part of that. And it's a good example. I spoke a fair amount about technology, but technology is not the solution for everything, right? We need people in our system. We need people to provide information, to provide assistance. So when you're in a scenario like that, the train crew absolutely should be coming onto the PA and telling customers what's going on. And, they have guidelines about how often and, after how long, with the train being stopped, they should be making announcements. That is what they should be, that is what the protocol is. If you're in a scenario where that doesn't happen, you can let us know.
Rachel?
Yes.
Question. What you presented today is a 2030 technology, which I know the MTA wishes that they had on every train and every bus and being modernized. What my wife is experiencing, unfortunately, is on trains that are not the new type. So what you're referring to for a transit authority person that is making that voice announcement on the older trains, there's no way for a hearing impaired person to know what that person is saying. That's one point. Secondly, the MTA on the older trains, the maintenance on them, the speaker systems, a lot of times they try to make an announcement, but it's garbled. So you have a two-prong issue, present time technology versus what you're presenting is the future technology. What we're looking to hear, what can you do for us with present old technology to improve the hearing impaired person to hear what is being said between stations or just general announcements?
Right. So, there's no single solution to that. And your point is well taken that, a lot of what we're talking about is investments for the future with the technology that's out there today. So first of all, when there are garbled announcements, and, I've been there, right? I've heard it. I know that happens. We can fix PA systems that are on cars today. So when we get a report, of something like that, we can look at it, we can address it. We can, we do our best. We're not going to magically take every, train out of service and rebuild the PA. But that's one approach. And that's also part of, why, as was mentioned, we think hearing loops are part of the approach, not the perfect solution for everybody. But there are other systems that have looped their train cars. In San Francisco, they've looped train cars. So that was part of our, goal in exploring retrofitting cars with hearing loops as well, for cars that don't have screens. And I think that, the screens in stations, the information presented, through the app and the website for those that have, access to that technology, it's all pieces of the puzzle. It's not the perfect answer in every scenario, but I think it's the combination of, the technology of the future, looking at ways to retrofit our existing technology, with PA system improvements, with hearing loops potentially, and with using technology that is available, that is our kind of, you know, approach, is very much both and, not one or the other.
Just giving present technology a chance. And I saw some comments in the chat column about the use of Bluetooth. Bluetooth is a technology that's here today. My wife has a hearing aid. I have hearing aids that are Bluetooth compatible. We can get that message through our phone. Why not have the MTA, rather than reinvent something new and try to implement it, have conductors and your present system use a Bluetooth-enabled PA system so that it can be broadcast on a Bluetooth?
The answer is because that technology doesn't exist. You're talking about Bluetooth 1-to-1. That's not what trains need. Trains need Bluetooth 1 to everybody. That's 5 to 10 years away in the laboratory. So I agree with you, it's wonderful, but it's not available.
Okay.
Any other questions from anyone? Okay, I have just, first of all, you know, want to thank Jessica and Rachel for a terrific presentation. And it brings up, I mean, I know that there's still a lot of dissatisfaction, but I think we've seen great improvements in the system.
She really didn't explain it. Fine.
I'm trying to talk here. Okay, Elise, go ahead, and then I'll continue with my comments. Elise, go ahead.
Excuse me, John. John,
Yes.
excuse me, it's Ruth. There's a gentleman whose name is Mike Howard who has his hand up, and he's been waiting very patiently for you to call.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. I can't be, I mean, I've asked for people to put it in the chat box. Mike Howard, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to see if any of you leaders look through the comment sections that I put in suggestions about the ENF lines and also the digital information center inside of the buses that has some of it, but I mean, I'm glad the new ones came with those.
He's talking.
What I'm saying is the old ones from 2008 to 2018 needs to have those that didn't have them yet. There's a lot.
Right, Mike, I know you've reached out to our team before, and if I'm understanding your question right, and yes, we do intend to retrofit the existing bus fleet with the digital information screens. It's not just the new buses that will get them.
Yes, yeah, because I know the 2008 to 2010 type bus is going to be going away soon. So that's why they should put those inside faster before they start getting rid of them. And one more, and about the E, every time I rode the E and the F line, I don't see, especially at 42nd Street, like start 42nd Street, Bryant Park, I see the ACE line is missing on the F line.
Got terrible maintenance.
And
I think that might be, I think they only show a transfer when the stations are actually all part of one station. And I think you actually have to exit the station to go to the other train at 42nd Street.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah, I went through that. I remember I went through that the other day. No, yesterday I went through that.
Yeah.
From the BD F and M line through the to the shuttle and NQ and R and W. When I was on that, I was like, wait a minute, where's the AC and where's the AC and E announcement? And then when I was on the E line, I was like, wait a minute, where's that B, D, F, and M announcement?
I don't think those trains actually connect in one station. I think you actually have to walk several avenues to get between them, and there's no way to connect without leaving the subway and going to the next one.
Yeah, I know, but they should be added so people can know about it.
I think we're going to have to, cut off the questions here, but there is one last thing that came in the chat box that is a very general kind of question. Someone asked, is there an effective way the MTA can provide us to report inaudible PA systems?
Yep. So I actually was chatting back to Hassan, but I will put it to everyone. So I'm putting the link to our customer feedback form in the chat. And I know this looks like a very, general, generic form, but please know that, your feedback is taken seriously. And in particular, if it's a car issue, if you give us the car number, which is, 4 numbers, and they're on usually on black and white stickers near the front of the car, a few different places. If we have the car number, that's really the critical information for us to be able to quickly pinpoint where the issue is and look at it. Like you've probably heard, hot car season, right? In August, when people tweet, I'm on car 1, 2, 3, 4, and the AC is not working, we will pull a car out of service and address an issue. So if we have the car number, and if you can't get that, as precise as you can be about where and when, if we know it was this date, this time at this location, we can figure out what car was running then. And like I said, we get a lot of customer feedback, and I know that, there can be a sense that you fill out a form and it goes into a black hole, but that's truly not the case. We take these things seriously, and particularly if it's something that is it's specific, it's actionable, and you can tell us the car or where you were, we will act on it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, I have one more question.
No, we really have to cut it off here. Thank you for all the questions, but
Can you talk about the OMNY more? The MetroCard
card?
My wife has problems with her MetroCard.
I think that kind of question can maybe be addressed outside of here. Those are individual questions, and we're just about out of time. Okay. So I just have a few things I would like to say in closing.
All right. Rachel, can you give us the contact for the MetroCard problem?
Are you going to put that in the chat box?
Sure. Yeah. It might depend on the specific nature of your issue, but I'll put in a link, and then we can follow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
I think there are 2 things that are clear from the discussion tonight. One is that there's still widespread problems and dissatisfaction. The other is that there's been enormous improvement. And I think that a few years ago, a meeting like this never would have taken place. The kind of things you've been doing would not have taken place. And I may be wrong in saying this, but I think can others please mute yourselves? I think I may be wrong in saying this, but I think the progress we have seen would not have taken place without advocacy. I think people like Jessica and others who've advocated, are probably largely responsible for creating these, committees and things that have improved things for us, which does bring up, it's not an MTA issue, but I would like to bring up another issue about captioning, which is, many of you may have gotten an email from us about open captioning in movie theaters. And if Jerry Bergman can just take a minute to talk about that, that would be terrific. Jerry?
Thank you, John. I want to just remind or explain to everybody that we have an opportunity in New York City to really set a precedent for the deaf and hard of hearing to make cinemas provide open caption screenings on a regular basis of the movies that they show. If you are among the majority of people who we think do not find open captions objectionable, whether you're a child, whether your English is a second language, or you have hearing loss or deafness, this is something that we've needed for a long time. And there's a bill, INT 2020, before the city council. Please call, email your city council members. If you live outside the 5 boroughs, please call or email Council Speaker Corey Johnson and tell them how much this means to our communities. All the deaf people, the 1 in 5 New Yorkers with hearing loss. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Jerry. And many thanks to Jessica and to Rachel. This was a terrific presentation and you handled questions very well and graciously. Also like to thank board member David Landsberger for being our Zoom host. And as always, our star captioner, Lauren Schechter, deserves our thanks. We continue to see many new faces tonight. To learn more about HLAA, to join or to donate to help us continue our activities, please go to the chapter website, hearinglossnyc.org. This past Sunday was the Walk for Hearing, which provides most of our revenue for the year. Donations were far below the levels of previous years, and it's been disappointing that so few of our members contribute to the chapter. If you attend our programs and find them helpful, I would encourage you to contribute, even if you're not in New York City and not one of our members. An additional thing I would like to discuss, Holly Cohen is here. I know many of you have already watched the new documentary about hearing loss, We Hear You, which features 3 members of our chapter. If you haven't, I think Holly is putting the link to the film on the chat. It may already be there. It's live until the talkback Thursday night at 7. The talkback is sold out, but if you've already registered, she suggests that you log on a few minutes early. And I know that the film has been generated a lot of enthusiasm, and I hope that many of you get to see it. Our next meeting is October 5th, which is only 2 weeks off. The topic will be a new way to see your hearing loss. Inventor/tech consultant/composer, J. Allen Zimmerman, and audiologist Brad Ingrau will discuss the limits of the current audiogram and how to get a clearer, fuller, more accurate, and easier to understand assessment of your hearing ability. Jay calls it the hearing visualizer. I think it'll be a very interesting meeting. Those of us who've seen Jerry's visualizer are very intrigued by it. I see that Holly just posted the link in the chat for the We Hear You video. But I hope to see many of you returning on October 5th for that presentation, and be on the lookout for an e-blast from our chapter about information about it and for registration information for the Zoom. So again, thanks to all and good night. Again, thanks especially to Rachel and to Jessica.
Thank you, John. And I just want to emphasize Catherine's note in the chat, and she says, the MTA, it's a huge old system and it's not easy to fix. And I think it is going to take a lot of time, but I am very happy that we're in dialogue with Rachel and their team. And I think just continuing to talk about this on a regular basis is just important. And yeah, definitely, reach out to me if you want to get involved. We need to hear more voices. So thank you.
That's great to hear. So good night, all.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye, David.
Hi, Jerry.